Or plan, the United States should restrict its nuclear forces by eliminating the ground-based leg of its nuclear triad. Advantage one is missile prolif. ICBMs crush strategic stability and dramatically increase the risk of nuclear war. False alarms, use it or lose it pressure, overflight, and rogue actors. This is Wilson in 16. ICBMs can easily be eliminated. While they could technically reach NOCO, China, or Iran, missiles would have to overfly Russia. Russia would counterattack. Any reasonable definition of deterrence will not require them. ICBMs reduce the president's reaction time. The commander in chief would be forced into a use it or lose it scenario. False alarms happen more often than you'd like to think. The immense pressure put on commanders caused nuclear war through a simple technical glitch. The DoD admitted 1,152 false alarms between 77 and 84. The mere existence of ICBMs complicates the decision-making process with thermonuclear annihilation as the ultimate consequence. There is no room to rely on luck. In an expose, Burns reported the institutional cultural rampant with misconduct among the ICBM fleet, including drug abuse and cheating on technical and readiness tests. Drunk, high, and bored human beings are not who you want controlling nuclear missiles. And qualitative and quantitative increases make war more likely. Spills over globally. This is Telegraph 11. Nuclear tensions in the Gulf, Northeast Asia threaten global security. The tensions are aggravated by ballistic missiles. Ballistic missiles with the ability to deliver WMD to a missile arms race has the direct potential to other regions. A missile arms race has the direct potential to lead to nuclear war. Deployment of missile tech, this tech will spread missile programs in regions of tensions, threaten stability globally, and the challenge posed by these programs is growing and they improve qualitatively. Specifically, rogue states will use them to spark global conflict. This is Gansler in 10. The proliferation of long-range missile technology and WMD into the hands of rogue actors. Asymmetric approaches can be effective against overall military strength, terrorism, and biological, chemical, and nuclear weapons, and long-range missiles. Rogues have stated the objective of, and it's unique to ICBMs. No other weapons pose a threat. This is Paltrow in 17. Of all weapons in the U.S. arsenal, the ICBM most likely to cause accidental nuclear war, arms control specialists say. A decision to launch must be so fast there would be no time to verify the threat. ICBM missiles cannot be recalled. They have no communication equipment. Critics recommend relying on the other legs of the triad. The president would have more time. Bombers can be recalled. Subs are undetectable. And miscalc circumvents their defense. This is Arbitrov in 6. It is difficult to ensure control over nuclear arms. The time travel of ballistic missiles is so short, but not have time to make a thorough assessment of situation. On whether to use nuclear weapons on human survival, dependents must act autopilot. This makes it extremely likely that someone will unleash nuclear war through miscalc or technical error. And arms control blocks asymmetric interference with the nuclear monitoring satellites. It prevents nuke war from misperceived first strikes. This is Hitchens in 19. The ban on interfering with early warnings and recon sats will disappear if Trump abandons New START. Besides capping nuclear force levels, the treaty includes prohibition on interference with national technical means of verification. With the end, there's no longer going to be any prohibition on interference. In the first 50 years, this could lead to a changed strategic context, which satellites linked to nuclear kill chain are legitimized as targets, which would increase the likelihood of misunderstanding and miscalc and erode strategic stability, market stability, and we're moving to the GBSD advantage. GPSD requires new plutonium pit production. Previous pits can't be relocated. This is Heersman et al. 20. New designs for warheads introduced W93 warhead designated not previously existed. Expand upon existing designs rather than relying on older designs. Modernization nuclear warheads require newly produced plutonium pits. W87 will sit atop GSD and will require new plutonium pits to function. Involves refreshing scientific engineering prowess in order to design modern, newly designed pits. Go ahead and mark at pits. This causes nuclear contamination. This is Kim in 21. Soil and water near nuclear weapon production and testing sites are contaminated. The DOE plans to bury 34 metric tons. The production of new pits create nuclear waste and contamination. The site leak nuclear waste into water. Modernization associated with waste issues are overlooked. PU-239 is so noxious that 1 pound would kill everyone. Residual plutonium is dispersed widely in the environment. Plutonium spread all over the world, included in soil cycle, water cycle, and food chain. Mass extinction of ocean life is predicted. Oceans play a leading role in Earth's overall climate. Humankind not presently set up to endure drastic changes. And GBSD fuels misperceptions of U.S. capabilities that destroy New START. This is Snyder and 20. The extension of New START keeps in place limitations on missile defenses. The restrictive New START prohibits using an ICBM for missile defense. Russians are fanatically opposed to U.S. missile defense. Russia has engaged in info war with the U.S. with missile defense, and a barely legal modification of GBSD would hand Russia a stick to beat us. A side-by-side comparison of the two versions would appear to show the same missile. Russia have a history of making factually inaccurate compliance charges against the U.S. And New START is the last hope for preventing U.S.-Russia war. This is Antov and Gotemoyer in 20. The New START has played a central role in preventing dangerous arms race. Without action to extend it, it could bring the return of nuclear competition. New START maintaining nuclear balances. New START is the sole legal instrument that keeps the now strategic nuclear arms race at bay. The extension of New START would create time for negotiations. The risk of accidental nuclear war will grow at the chance that the crisis may escalate quickly. Mark it quickly. And then I just didn't read the last two cards.
Okay. Are you good for cross?
I'm open for cross.
Cool. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Cool. So let's start on the first advantage. The Telegraph 11 evidence is from 13 years ago. Why haven't we seen an impact?
So the Telegraph evidence, the Telegraph evidence is just basically saying, like, even though we haven't seen the impact in the past 10 years, it's still escalating up into that point.
Okay. What evidence have you read from the last year that says that conflict is coming now and is likely?
Hold on, I cannot find the document. Okay, so I was looking at the wrong one. Okay. So whenever we look at why conflict's happening likely, we can talk about the Paltrow 17 evidence, which shows it's unique to ICBMs. These are the ones that are causing
Sure.
in modern day.
The Paltrow 17 evidence is again from a long time ago and is also we've had ICBMs for over 50 years. Why hasn't there been an impact?
Well, we see new modernization and development. You can even go down to the GBSD advantage.
Sure.
That's basically talking about how new modernization is
Okay, let's talk about the Gansler evidence. It says that rogue states will use them to spark
environment.
global
So
conflict.
seeing escalation.
Okay, the Gansler 10 evidence is about rogue states. What are examples of rogue states?
So it specifically talks about we could say so a rogue state is basically just saying these it could be Iran, it could be Pakistan, India.
Okay.
So it also talks about non-state actors, which could be different terrorist groups
Wait,
too.
did you say India is an example of a rogue state?
Maybe not India, but the Pakistan-India conflict can go rogue. We can talk about that later if you really
Okay.
want to pick at it, which I don't think you do.
It talks about biological weapons getting into the hands of rogue actors. How does the AF solve?
It just de-escalates. So causing de-escalation means that the weapons aren't going to be spread. They have no incentive to get those biological weapons.
Okay. That's fine. The GBSD advantage, the Anatov and Gadamoller evidence is about New START. Russia pulled out of New START or February of 2023. What line of evidence says that ending the GBSD program would bring them back?
So I didn't get to it, but the Kimball 21 evidence specifically talks about how it's going to be increasing talks with Russia because the ICBMs are no longer going to be that first strike barrier.
Sure, but where does it say that it would bring them back to New START?
We're saying that it creates the possibility for them to come back to New START.
Okay, where does the Kimball 21 evidence, it wasn't read, but where does it say New START?
It's saying basically that ICBMs are what's pushing Russia away. You get rid of them, they come back.
Okay.
It's the last line.
The one in C was sent. Do y'all see it?
Give me 1 second. Yeah, I got it.
Okay, cool. So is this 6 or 7 minutes?
The 7.
Okay, cool. Is everybody all good? Cool. First is the Japan disadvantage. ICBMs are key to assurances because they allow defense against nuclear weapons in a way that no other leg of the triad can. This is from Dodge in 21. ICBMs are important to Allied security. Japan relies on the nuclear umbrella. Nuclear guarantees have allowed allies to forego their own nuclear weapons. They've refrained from doing so due to confidence in US guarantees. Assurance that extended deterrence remains effective requires that the US retains nuclear capabilities. The triad, including its ICBM leg, provides flexibility. ICBMs create synergies and enhance credibility of US security guarantees. Japan proliferation would be the catalyst for global nuclear acquisition. This is from Acevedo and et al. In 2023. Japan prolif would spur a worldwide reevaluation of global frameworks, and that would likely be overturned. Without Japan as a non-nuclear power, the outcome would be a domino effect that would contribute to a volatile in global security. Japan would lose any legitimacy. When a role model goes against the idea that it supported, it will disenfranchise the ideology itself. This would produce an ideological anarchy surrounding non-prolif. The Republic of Korea and the Republic of China perceive a nuclearized Japan as a threat and may attempt to match their capabilities. Japan's proliferation would serve as the catalyst for an arms race among a nuclearized East Asia. Iran would have pretenses to pursue nuclear weapons. Once this ship is sunk, there would be nothing preventing ideological dissolution. The global geopolitical environment may enter nuclear disarray. And global proliferation ensures extinction, from Bartow in 22. Proliferation as a method of promoting peace does not take into account accidental and unauthorized nuclear explosions of nuclear terrorism. Spreading nuclear weapons would drastically increase the chances of an unwanted detonation, setting off a chain of catastrophes for which there will be no return. The next off-case position is the consult counterplan. The United States should engage in binding consultations with Japan to propose eliminating the ground-based leg of its nuclear triad, with offers to supplement extended deterrence through capacity building, multilateral operations, and missile defense integration. Japan would say yes to the counterplan. Excuse me. When the US takes steps to consult them on nuclear policy, consultations build stronger alliances and assure allies in the Pacific. Even if consultations fail, the adversarial perception of a strong alliance builds deterrence, from Anderson in 2013. The US and allies have established formal consultative mechanisms that are important for extending deterrence. Adversaries observe consultations and conclude it will be difficult to fracture the alliances. Consultative mechanisms are important to Allied assurance. Consultations address many of the critical decisions to defense. Agreements reached during consultations are critical to address the assurance needs. The US ROK consultative meeting, the SCM, is an established mechanism to address extended deterrence. Next, onto the first advantage. First, there is no chance of an accidental launch, from Geller in 21. The claim that ICBMs are on hair trigger alert have military leaders discredited that falsehood. The commander of the US Strategic Command has made clear that hair trigger alert is not a thing. Our ICBMs are responsive, but that does not equate to an accidental launch. That means that adversaries know that the US can respond quickly. Attacks would occur within tensions or conventional conflicts, making a false alarm improbable. To boost deterrence, the US does retain the option to launch, and adversaries with large arsenals cannot destroy US ICBMs because the president has the option of launching. There are a multitude of safeguards that make an accidental or unauthorized ICBM launch nearly impossible. An ICBM is not like a loaded gun. Is there a big red button? Given safeguards required to launch ICBMs, in their critical role in deterring large-scale attacks, it's past time to retire the claim of hair trigger alert. Additionally, use it or lose it explanations for crisis instability make no sense because no rational state would initiate a nuclear war because it's afraid of a nuclear war. This is from Cronin in 18. America's adversaries may feel use them or lose them pressures, but this argument withers under interrogation. The superior state retains the ability to retaliate. So even if the inferior state is worried about having its weapons eliminated to launch first as a coping mechanism would intentionally launch a nuclear war against the state with a second strike capability. Even if the inferior state launches first, it will be guaranteed to suffer devastating retaliation. This would mean launching a nuclear war that will turn out much worse for itself than its opponent. It would be irrational. Theorists want us to believe that if the US enhances superiority, China would face greater temptations to launch first in a crisis. China would be so worried about losing a nuke war that it would start a nuke war, and this argument does not make sense. And there's zero risk of nuclear terror because acquisition is impossible, terrorists can't make bombs, and no group wants to. This is from Euler in 23. One would be to be given or sold a bomb, which is improbable, and two, the source of the weapon would be discovered. The bomb would be exploded on a target that the donor would not approve. A second route would be to steal or purchase, which is difficult to maintain and have a lifespan of up to 1 to 3 years. There are no loose nukes. All nuclear nations take security very seriously. Devices will destroy the bomb if it's tampered, and bombs can be disassembled. Codes are required to store, maintain, and to deploy. Such a device would be unsafe, unpredictable, and inefficient. Stateless groups are incapable of manufacturing the fissile material for a bomb because the process requires an effort on an industrial scale. It is decreasingly likely that the theft would remain undetected. Next, on the second advantage. Recent agreements make the affirmative plan meaningless because pit production is inevitable. Our evidence is way newer, and their most recent card on this scenario is from years ago. This is from the NNSA on February 9th of this year, or of 2023. The Department of Energy has really reached an important milestone on LAP4, approving the start of construction. The NNSA is repurposing the Savannah River to produce at least 50 pits a year. This includes 30 pits per year. The 30-base project will increase pits. And there's no credibility. Single triad changes are not credible and are useless for crisis stability, from Horowitz et al. 21. The benefits of sole purpose could only be achieved if the US fundamentally changed the structure of its nuclear forces. Moscow and Beijing have already voiced their doubts about a US sole purpose declaratory policy. For US adversaries, they see nuclear weapons only as means for dealing with nuclear aggression, and Washington would have to significantly scale back weapons in other situations. Just eliminating individual categories, for example, ICBMs, would be insufficient. We'll cut the card at insufficient. And arms control fails because Russia and China say no, and there's no enforcement. From Williams and Adam Polos in 22. Russia's invasion poisoned prospects for dialogue on reducing nukes. Activities have already proven to be damaging to arms control and disarm efforts. Arms control has been under strain, and the war highlighted its limits and preventing aggression and escalation. The war demonstrated limits focused on avoiding inadvertent escalation, but Russia's invasion was not an accident. Russian and Chinese strategies involve manipulation of risk underpinned by a reliance on nukes for coercion. They do not want to reduce risks. Russia has consistently violated arms control obligations and have drawn down participation in activities, decreased transparency, and backstopped its actions with nuclear threats. Nuclear weapons are of increasing strategic value to autocrats, and Putin's relied on nukes throughout Ukraine. Cut that card at Ukraine. I am ready for cross.
I'm just flipping over my flow.
You're good.
Right, first. So does Japan have the resources to proliferate nuclear weapons right now?
They do. Actually, most studies suggest that Japan would be able to, by the time they start building a nuclear weapon, have the nuclear weapon completely finished within 6 months.
Okay, what about South Korea?
South Korea absolutely does. Our argument is not necessarily that South Korea will proliferate. Our argument's mostly about Japan. However, South Korea does also have the means and the motive to proliferate, especially after the affirmative plan.
Yeah, I'm mostly going off of your evidence that says, like, if Japan proliferates, it leads to global proliferation. Like, what's the link here with that?
Well, the
like,
link is
going to proliferate if Japan does.
Sure, a couple of things. The first is that if Japan decides to proliferate an indigenous nuclear weapons capability, that makes other states fearful because of the changing security dynamics in the Asia-Pacific region. So, for example, if Japan proliferates nuclear weapons and that causes China and North Korea to launch preventative strikes, then other countries will proliferate their own nuclear weapons to protect their own interests against states like China and North Korea. Additionally, Japan proliferating nuclear weapons means that countries like South Korea would want to proliferate. It talks about Iran proliferating nuclear weapons too, because it gives them the excuse. Countries would see Japan proliferating nuclear weapons as an expanded US influence in the region, which means that they want to be able to defend themselves with nuclear weapons as well.
Okay. So I'm understanding. I guess what I'm just not understanding is why are subs and bombers not going to be able to fill in for the role ICBMs play right now?
The Dodge 21 evidence is really good. It says a couple of things. The first is that ICBMs are the most responsive and most flexible leg of the triad. And so Japan feels as if ICBMs are uniquely key to security guarantees. The second is that the US has, or if the US eliminated its ICBM fleet, it would overall send a signal to Japan that says that we're willing to scale down on nuclear guarantees, especially after the most recent NPR promised no nuclear reductions. So there are a couple of links. The first is just about the flexibility of ICBMs and the response time. The second is about the sort of signal that the plan would send.
All right, cool. Now let's go ahead and talk about the consultation CP. So if Japan's going to say yes no matter what, like, why is consulting them absolutely crucial?
A couple of things. The first is that Japan does not say yes no matter what. The only scenario for Japan saying yes and reacting positively to the ask is if there is prior consultation. Second is that if the US consults Japan, then that makes Japan more assured in terms of what other security guarantees we'll be using, and also sort of what the US's plan would be in the scenario of a conflict.
All right. Okay. So then also with that, like, when we look at like ICBMs, you see like the miscalculation risks. Do you think we have not consulted with Japan already about those?
I don't think that we've consulted with Japan about eliminating our ICBM fleet. Also, we have proven, I think, via the cards I read on the first advantage, that there is simply no risk of miscalculation.
Okay, cool. Thanks. I'm gonna go ahead and start prep.
While Addie's prepping, I'm going to go grab my computer charger from upstairs. So I'll be right back.
All right. I'm good. I'm gonna get this saved and sent out. Where did I just put the document? That was the next question. Is this the 1AR or the 2AC?
Technically, it is the one AR,
Okay.
but obviously it's your first chance to answer a bunch of stuff, so.
Yeah. Um, I just couldn't remember what we called them.
Irma, when you get it, if you could Slack it to me, it would be awesome.
The order is case in which it was presented, and then I'm going to do assurances, then the CP.
I'm good, Lennon, you got it? You ready?
Yep.
Um, Oh, I forgot to set my timer. Cool. On advantage one, ICBMs are inherently destabilizing because they're going to circumvent missile defenses. This incentivizes these preemptive strikes, and it destroys deterrence, and it forces all sides to further proliferate. We saw for rogue states miscalculation and US-Russia arms racing that's going to spill over to nuclear war, and that's going to go into that satellite scenario. And yes, we're going to see miscalculation for three reasons. First, it's going to be the use it or lose it pressures. The Jews become pressured to make quick wartime decisions. Second is accidents. Even if the probability is low, the 1AC UCS says that human bias, info ambiguity, and technical errors have proven risk. These countermeasures disrupt the early warning systems via satellites, which make the accidents more prone to happen. That was the first card that we read on case. Also, let's talk about the rogue actors. They'll use ballistic missiles because there's no fear of retribution. That's the Wilson evidence. So specifically, we're talking about nuclear terrorism. We're looking at ballistic missiles and other forms that can be used. And it's because of the pressures that ICBMs are putting on the system. So this takes out their CROIG 18 and their M23 evidence. Going on, let's go ahead and talk about the assurances here. Or no, actually, go on to the second advantage. My bad. I was not looking at my phone. I was looking at the documents. So on to the second advantage with the GBSD. They're trying to say that current agreements and productions are going to be inevitable. However, they're inevitable in the world of ICBMs. As long as these ICBMs are going to continue and you see the modernization occurring, you have to have the new pits to ensure that these are going to be made. So you are able to you're able to make sure that the contamination does not continue, no more environmental harms whenever you eliminate the ICBM legs of the triad. This takes out their NNSA23 evidence. They tried to also say that it's not credible to take They tried to also argue that it's not credible whenever you're for deterrence, whenever you're taking out of these. However, that's not going to be the case. You'll see that the fill-ins with the SSBNs and also the bombers are sufficient right now. We also have conventional capabilities, and the not credibility does not outweigh the idea that these new pits are going to cause more problems in the future via environmental degradation. By environmental degradation. Give me 1 second to continue to navigate. Because of the environmental degradation that's going to continue. With that, let's go on to assurances. First, case turns the DA. First, it boosts security vis-a-vis NOCO in China, which drives their security fears. It also, the fear surrounding Chinese proliferation and other countries' proliferation harms the alliance structure, and it heightens the U.S. diplomatic failures. And ICBMs are not going to be key. You can go ahead and cross-apply this to their not credible evidence on case. This is the Sacco and 17 evidence. Japan is considering enhancements to missile defense. Japan should have some capability to defend itself against small-scale strikes, but not have the capability to defend itself against large large-scale strikes because of the U.S. extended deterrence should be effective in preventing such attacks. And Chinese modernization wrecks assurances it turns the DA. This is Satao in 17. Deployment of the IIA raised new questions about strategic stability. How much is enough for Japan to process for the sake of its defense? Japan should have the capability to defend itself against small-scale strikes, but Japan need not have the capability to defend itself fully against large-scale strikes because of U.S. extended deterrence commitments prevent such attacks. And the development of missile defense challenging East Asian security reactions increase the threat to allies. And nuclear prolif is only possible in the status quo. Japan has no capabilities to prolif, but if they did, it's in a response to China. And subs and TNWs also solved. This is Roberry in 14. The extended nuclear deterrence to Japan remains strong. SLBMs, in addition to the ability to redeploy tactical forces in the event of a crisis, signal commitment to allies. Now let's go on to the CP. First, perm to the plan after consultation, no matter what. If they win, say yes, then there's no disadvantage to the perm. Going on to the solvency deficits, there's no solvency. This requires specific evidence about the plan. Also, air affirmative on theory until they prove that their argument is predictable. And if they warp the literature, it's based on its turns in the education of the class through the bad research. It's also a delay. Consultation takes forever. It must solve soon because of the impacts of environmental degradation and nuclear worth via miscalc. It also fails to comply. The consultation is implicit pressure to say yes. The illusion of consultation reinforces allies as a junior partner. This is Batu in 83. Appearance is all it can be achieved. States will pay lip services. The ritual of consultation can have the effect of illusion and presenting as voluntary acceptance in what is in fact a concession to pressure. American consultation has amounted to little more than invitation to endorse the policies that have already been decided upon. And normal means is a triple bind. Either consultation is either normal means and the plan does so, or consult is not normal means and so a relationship is going to be doomed. Or consult is not normal means because the relationship has been maintained in other ways. This also means that they don't get to have access to their increasing of partnership or allyship because the relationship would already be doomed if consultation would not have happened in the future, which means it turns any advantage that they could garner off of the consult CP. They also Additionally, consult CPs are a voting issue because they're infinitively regressive and artificially inflate the small disads, which undermine real-world education and undermines the topic-specific education, which makes it inherently bad for this specific debate. I have 30 seconds left, so I'm going to go ahead and go back up to the GBSD advantage. So we've already shown that these new ICBM developments are inherently bad for environments, and this is going to be a reason that you vote for the case because it effectively went conceded. They tried to say that it's going to be inevitable, but they dropped the fact that that's going to be inevitable absent the world of the status quo where ICBMs are going to continue. All right, with that, I'm done.
Okay, 4 minutes, right? Start prep now. All right, stop rep. I had 219. I will send it out.
I have it from the folder.
Addie, are you good?
Yeah, I'm good. Whenever you're ready.
This is 6 minutes.
6 minutes, yes. What's the order?
Okay. It is the Japan disad, the consult counterplan, advantage 1, advantage 2. Is everybody good? Sweet. Japanese proliferation outweighs. That's Acevedo and Barteau. First is time frame. Japan has the capabilities for rapid nuclear acquisition, and the plan hands them the motive. The starting attempt alone creates a domino effect that guarantees quick nuclear miscalculation. You should prioritize the speed of impacts because the world can only go extinct once. Second, a nuclearized Japan destroys the non-proliferation regime and instantly ignites an arms race among a nuclearized East Asia that ensures Chinese drawing, which is all magnified by the risk of accidental and unauthorized explosions and nuclear terror. Third, it turns China because it causes preventive strikes by North Korea and China to launch, which draws in the US and causes nuclear war. The case does not outweigh on speed. This is Jackson 22. Japan positioned nukes and could develop its own in a short time frame and relate rhetoric to fear of abandonment. Allied prolif would trigger DPRK or China. Adversaries heighten strategic incentives. Could you conduct preventative attacks? EMP risks direct damage to infrastructure, and the DPRK or China could conduct preventive strikes, and the US feel compelled to redouble, leading to heightened nuclear alert levels. Strategists consider retail aimed at imposing costs that would lead to counter-retaliatory targeting. The case does not turn the disadvantage, because North Korea and Chinese security enhancements are impossible in a world where Japan develops nukes. Their evidence does not. Second is that Chinese modernization is inevitable. My opponent then said that other weapons solve. However, that's false. We've proven that ICBMs are key because they're the most flexible and they send a signal of strong US resolve. That was the Dodge evidence from our first speech. Second is that there's no reassurance. There's no evidence that says that reassurance measures would be likely or that any policymaker would be driven to make them happen, which means that it has to be a mandate of the plan. And conventional reassurance has failed. First, because of the speed and magnitude of the link, because the link happens before reassurance can be effectively deployed. All of our link evidence is comparative and says that key Japanese strategists would advise immediately becoming a nuclear state, absent the extended deterrence advantages of ICBMs. Second, the disadvantage comes first. Nuclear deterrence is a prerequisite to credible conventional forces, from Fruehling and O'Neill 22. The potential for escalation lies at the heart of nuclear deterrence. U.S. views on escalation became relevant in assessing credibility of conventional deterrence. For alliances, U.S. needs to focus on the importance of damage limitation capabilities, cathartic capabilities. They then said that Japan does not have the ability to proliferate weapons. However, that's false. They do have the means, and acquisition would be quick. That's Fitzpatrick in 19. Japan pursues nuclear hedging, preserving the capability to develop nuclear weapons. Japan has the ability to enrich uranium, reprocess plutonium, and can develop an arsenal in as little as a year. Japanese scientists are capable of both tasks and could accomplish them on a tight timetable. Next, on the consult counterplan. The counterplan solves risks of alienation by involving Japan in consultations ICBMs. They'll say yes, but prior and binding consultations are key to get them on board. And consultations boost the credibility of extended deterrence to adversaries, which was the Anderson evidence. Consultation over nuclear force reductions assures Japan of U.S. commitment, from Roberry in 2014. Since Japan monitors U.S. nuclear policy, the U.S. must consider the implications of changes for the assurance of Japan. The U.S. government should consult Japan on reductions. These consultations will become important if the U.S. approaches nuclear parity with China. Japan may be concerned with the U.S. nuclear stockpile relative to other nuclear weapon states, especially China. They then made the argument that we can do both at the same time. However, the permutation is impossible. First, because the plan does not consult and the counterplan does. Second is pressure, because the policy is announced immediately, which forecloses prior consultation. This is from Newsom in 92. Policymakers are under intense pressure to announce a decision as soon as it's been made. The instrument may be a draft of a public statement, or a speech should be released as soon as internal agreement is reached. Consultation with allies is foreclosed by this. Allies are presented with a fait accompli. Third is fixed policy. It closes the proposal to modification before inaction, which is key to reaching an agreement, from Morales in 98. When a government anticipates that a decision may harm another discussion, can provide opportunity for readjustment and minor modifications may be all that's required. It is far easier to make modifications at decision-making than later, which is when the same action may seem like capitulation. Next, they said that the counterplan would take too long. However, that's wrong. The first is they've established no impact or no time frame for their impacts, but the disadvantage happens immediately and environmental degradation takes time. Second, you should err negative. We've had ICBMs for over 50 years and the impact hasn't happened. There's a negligible time frame deficit because consultations are speedy once initiated, from Okamoto in 2002. For Japan, the US is the country's only ally. Japan concentrates all its attention on smoothing relations. Treated with consideration, Japan delivers, and Defense Secretary Warenberger was surprised at the speed in which Japan agreed. Next, they said the consult counterplans are bad. However, that's false. They're good for education. They formulate real-world policy making processes, and they're not abusive. Solvency advocacy literature checks garbage counterplans. At worst, you should reject the argument because the punishment should fit the crime. Next, on the first advantage, there is simply no risk of miscount. Airmen must decode the message, authenticate the source, target the missile, unlock it, checks that make auto launch false. Use it or lose it pressures are wrong because it assumes that leaders somehow have an incentive to choose the worst possible option, which is an empirically disproven theory, which was the 1NC Geller evidence. You should err negative because over 70 years of tech stability disproves it, and new GPS and satellites make it even more effective. Next, there's no risk of nuclear terror. There's no motive, weapon transfer, or loose nukes. Groups have expressed limited desire, and only one Japanese cell has ever tried, but they were stopped due to hurdles. That was the Mueller evidence. Next, on the second advantage. Pits are already being developed independent of GBSD, which means that the app is meaningless because their impact is inevitable and should already happen. Next, arms control fails. The first is empirics, because the INF, CTC, CWC all prove that Russia and China have a history of treaty violations and say no. Nuclear power is integral to regime legitimacy and possess strategic values for autocrats that are unwilling to give up. That was the Williams evidence. Their own evidence even said that Russia has a history of violating New START agreements, which proves that even if Russia signs on to New START after the plan, nothing will happen because there's simply no enforcement. I did not read the last part.
All good. Hey, Irma, I actually forgot to write down how much prep I had left. I think I had like a minute 30, a minute 10. Okay,
Yeah, go for it.
cool. Cool. Order is going to be case. I guess I should. I'm not reading any new evidence, so I can like save it still, but yeah. But order is going to be case in the order that it was presented, and then it's going to be the DA, then the CP. Is anybody not ready? All right. I see Irmo's ready. And Lennon's also ready. I was like, I guess like Lennon doesn't have another like speech, so I didn't really. Well, I'm just getting a ton of text messages. Okay. Cool. I'm just making sure my documents were all in order. All right. Okay, on the first advantage, I'm going to go ahead and concede it and on saying no accidents are going to actually happen. And then we're going to move on to the second advantage of GBSD. So first, the negative has continued to try and argue throughout this debate that pit developments are going to continue. However, ICBMs are going to be the leading cause of those pit developments. That's what we established for you within the 1AC. So when the new modernization is going to require them. If you allow for the modernization of ICBMs and the GBSD to continue, that's what develops these pit developments. And they went ahead and dropped all of the structural and environmental violence that is going to occur with these pit developments. You will see massive environmental degradation that is going to lead to ocean acidification and contamination, which we are not prepared to do for. It will accelerate the effects of climate change, which will become existential to the human race, which is going to outweigh in turn any other impacts that they are going to try and argue for because of the magnitude. It will affect not just the United States, not just any other nuclear states. It will affect the entirety of the world and also our environment because of because of that. They also try to argue here that arms control is what's going to fail because of the treaty violations. However, the arms control is not going to be the key point here. It's going to be the new pits that we are going to go ahead and develop. We are also opening up the opportunity for arms control to continue. So even if arms control fails, that doesn't mean that you negate the affirmative case. It just means that the United States is still taking those steps. It's just because Russia or China are not going to be doing something doesn't mean that you negate the entirety of the case. If you believe that is a good idea or that there's a 1% risk of the affirmative impacts from happening due to like environmental degradation and climate change, you still cast your ballot for the affirmative. With that, let's go on to the DA. The case continues to turn and outweigh the DA because we are still boosting the security because we are getting rid of the security fields. That's so that even if the arms control fails, we are still getting rid of ICBMs, which are inherently destabilizing. The negative here has mistaken the flexibility, has mistaken flaws for flexibility. Just because you have the ability to have that instantaneous launch on warning posture does not mean that is a good idea. That's what leads to situations of security failures between North Korea and China. Additionally, second, the fears surrounding the Chinese proliferation are what are harming alliance structures with the United States and our current allies, which means that we are turning their disadvantage because the alliance structure is harmed whenever ICBMs continue to exist. Additionally, the effective BMD is what solves the Japan alliance. Empirics showed that was the Soto evidence, and that's what causes you to vote for the affirmative on the disadvantage. Additionally, the ICBMs are also not going to be key. Again, that was the BMD is going to be more key, and the only way to have effective BMD development is to get rid of the ICBMs. Additionally, nuclear proliferation is only going to be possible in the world of the status quo, and you can cross-apply this over to the CP because subs and TNW solve. Additionally, extend the perm on the counterplane, which says that even if they say yes, it means that the relations are going to be durable. They also went ahead and dropped the net benefit for the triple bind, which shows that they have not solidified this logic of the net benefit. So if consultation is normal means voting AF is what caused voting AF consults inherently. Thank you. Good debate.
Yeah, good debate.
Yeah. My time allocation was weird on that one.